What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Get Over Yourself podcast, a podcast hosted by me, Brandon Davis, and we are a podcast dedicated to destroying your self-limitations. In today's episode, I got Rebekah Scott sitting next to me, and a little bit about her. She's a Midwest mama, serial entrepreneur, and host of the Encourager podcast. She's a designer and founder of a handmade purse and accessory brand for over the past 15 years, and she's a coach for moms committed to helping them thrive in their multi-passionate lifestyle without hustling. And Rebekah, this is a topic I'm very, very interested in. I am actually a firm believer of hustling, so I'm curious to see what you have to say on this topic today. Maybe you have a different definition than I do, but I'm excited to have this conversation. For all the listeners out there, Rebekah is a very, very wise lady, and she's going to be sharing a lot of wisdom about her own brand, how she created that. It's also is how we can balance our work inside of our lives. So Rebekah, thank you for joining the Get Over Yourself podcast today.
Well, that's quite the lineup. I mean, I have to be wise. So everyone, I'm going to slow my voice down so I sound wiser. Just kidding. Thank you. Yes, I'm excited to be on today. It's funny you mentioned hustle because, I think in the last couple of years now there's like the anti-hustle culture as well. I'm like, okay, of course we're going to make a thing out of the next thing, right? But when I mean like anti-hustle, that doesn't necessarily qualify for me because I do think that there are stages in life, or not necessarily roles, because I don't think you hustle in your roles, meaning wife, mother, owner, designer, son, whatever. I don't think you hustle in your roles necessarily, but you hustle in some of your jobs and some of your stages of life to get to the next thing. So I do think there are phases, especially in work, where you do need a little bit of hustle. Where you should be concerned is if your hustle is nonstop. And I am a self-confessing hustler. So I have to keep reminding myself, wait, if I'm going to hustle for this growth, if I'm going to start this new thing, I need to define when the hustle period of it will be over. Because otherwise, I will just keep hustling until exhaustion and burnout. And that doesn't serve any of my roles very well as well. So I think there is a time and place for hustle, but you do need to have the end point for it. And for some, that might be a year out. Some that might be only 6 weeks, but really define for yourself and for your family. When will that hustle period be over so that you're in more of the sustainability period?
I like that. And I want to jump into that for the full entirety of the episode. So let's get into that a little bit farther.
Okay, let's unpack it.
So I'll give you a situation I'm in right now.
Okay.
So as I'm working on my startup right here, everyone who's watching, you can see our little logo and stuff in the background here. As I'm working on it, there's a lot of long days. Most mornings I'm leaving around 7 a.m., getting back around 7 p.m. And that's time I don't necessarily have for myself. Then when I get home, I'll go hit the gym or something. Luckily, I get to do that with my wife, so that includes a little bit of time together. But I'm in that stage of hustling right now. Yes. And I think I like what you said at the beginning, and so I want to question you on this a little bit. But I think there's some points in life where that's kind of where you have to be if you want to grow yourself, get out of your comfort zone, grow your business. Like, especially here on my podcast, it's a group of hustlers. It's a group of people who are trying to make a name for themselves and trying to become a better version. So when you say that there's a time frame for that hustle, what exactly do you mean there?
I mean, decide okay, so yours is a side gig that you're building up, or a main gig. Sorry, forgive me. Whatever that is. So you're saying you're from 7 to 7 p.m. and then you are getting some amazing time with your wife and happens to be in the gym. That's great. But have you decided for yourself when this initial hustle and all this hard work is going to get to a point where it's more sustainable? So let's say I need more details about what you're doing right now so that you can say, okay, but this phase will be over at 6 weeks. And then what will I be doing different after those 6 weeks? So maybe it's a breakdown of the goal. Like the goal is this, the goal is to launch. So that's a launch period. So how long do we want our launch to be? Do we want to build up this launch for 12 months, which would be a ridiculously long one? As I'm sure you're aware, no. Hustlers can launch it 12 weeks, right? So 12 weeks, that's your mark for that part of the hustle of the job. Then what's the next thing you're going to build? Does that one require near as much hustle, or is that a little bit more easier pace because you've got things in place so that the hustling isn't required? Does that answer it?
Yeah, so I'll give you a little bit of framework. This is kind of fun. I feel like it'll be beneficial for the audience to kind of hear how your process works and see if they mold into that. So right now, like I mentioned, my time frame of kind of the general work day. What it is, it's an AI receptionist for automotive businesses. So most of my day currently, as I have I currently have technicians who are working on building out the product and whatnot. And most of my day includes cold emails, cold calls, reaching out to our current clients, just random administrative stuff as we're in the growth stage. And so I feel like it's sometimes difficult, especially in a startup right now, to say like, I don't know how long my period is going to be for how long I need to work. You know what I'm saying? Like every day is going to be completely different. And that could mean my success or my hustle period, as you call it, is going to be 6 weeks. It's very unlikely, and it's been way longer than 6 weeks so far. It could be another 3 years from now. I have no direction until I start seeing the actual results. And we're kind of in that stage right now. We've been building out this product for about a year now, and we just started beta testing in January. So there's different stages, but I feel like every stage brings on an extra level of like, okay, now that we did this, we have to go and do this, and go. So so add on to that a little bit now.
A couple of suggestions. So as you're doing the cold calling and the email and all that, mark how many customers do you, and you have to know your numbers really well. How many customers do you need to acquire to at least cover to cover payroll, to cover your bases? Do you know how many that is? You don't have to say it here, but know that number. So then that is your baseline number. When you've got that, then you do need to pause and celebrate it, because otherwise we'll go for the next thing, right? So like whatever that looks like, my celebrations would probably be people would sleep through mine, but like take a moment and pause. What would the customers and all these cold calling be? So that if I make this many cold calls, if I make 50 cold calls, about 3 of them get back to me, or 1 of them get back to me. So then you can also know like, okay, but if I get the 3, then let's say I get to 27 of these customers, that's where I can start covering my fees or whatever that looks like. So I think you need to know your numbers, and then make the goal. How many customers do I need to reach the number to break even? How many do I need to make profit? That sort of thing. Then, okay, if that still is like, but I still got to be hustling after that, because breaking even is not the goal, right? That's not the goal. The goal is being profitable. How many other people can you start getting involved? Because you've made all of these, chances are you already have a system around these calls. So my other suggestion would be, I'm a huge fan. This is like I think it'll be on my gravestone, you guys, is time everything. Time everything. And not in like a ninja type way with a stopwatch. But if you sat down, Brandon, and like made note each day when you're hustling right now, how many minutes it's taking to do the cold calls and the cold emailing, and just take note of it. Like, I spent 45 minutes on it today. I spent an hour and a half on it. I'm not talking 37 minutes. However, I do that in mine because I've got it so dialed in. Then you can know like, okay, this is this chunk of the day. If I want to double my calls so that I can grow, this is how much I need to make room for in the day for that. Or I just need to be more efficient at it and like work out the pre-scripts for these phone calls. Could I get a virtual assistant to help me make these phone calls? But then you kind of ride that line too, where I'm sure they want to hear your voice because you have so much passion that you do need to prioritize it. You don't want to hire that part out, but making the pre-scripts and setting up who you're going to call, that could be done by someone else.
It's funny you bring that up. We literally just hired somebody 2 days ago to start scraping all the websites and emails and stuff, because that was taking a huge chunk of my time. Huge chunk, hours every single day, was just going and finding these businesses that I could eventually cold call or cold email. And I found somebody for that. So boom, your example works. There we go.
Yes. So what are you going to be doing with the extra hours that you've been given now?
Well, the goal is he's scraping way quicker than I ever could. That's kind of his profession. He's very, very good at it. And so as he keeps getting more leads, rather than taking the extra couple hours to find the leads, I'll just be calling them and cold emailing them.
Yes. Okay, so that's going
to be my life for the next probably 8 months, and I love it.
Okay, so why did you say 8 months?
I don't know. I'm just pulling out a random number because you told me to. I have no idea where it comes from.
Well, it might just mean like that's what you've taken so far as we get into the 4th month. It's like, okay, it's going to take me a year now of leading that. Now, once you start doing that, you'll also be thinking about the follow-up phone calls as well.
Yep.
So that might be something that somebody else does for you.
Yeah,
instead of you having to do the follow-up calls, unless you're the super passionate one. I don't know, but there's something to be said for when the owner calls about the latest thing. I'm way more attuned to like, I'm so glad the founder prioritized the cold phone calls. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it's definitely slower, but it works.
I think it works, and I want that FaceTime with our clients right now. That's kind of a story in and of itself, but I want to give a different example now. I like this framework. I like how you're kind of walking everybody through this. Let's give I'm going to give the example of my sister, Nicole. She is I know everyone says they're busy, and we all are busy in our own outrights. But as I look at her, when I think my life is busy, when I think I'm going through something tough, I look at her and I think, holy crap, I don't understand how she gets anything done. This girl, she's like, in her local church congregation, she's kind of like the head of a lot of the women there. And so she has a million church responsibilities to do every week. She has 5 daughters, 2 of which are twins who are under the age of, it's their birthday on Saturday. And I'm going to completely space on how old they are. I think they're 4 or 5 now. 4?
Sure. Okay.
It could be 3. I don't know. But anyways, very young kids. She has a daughter who's 15, so she doesn't even have anyone who can drive in the house yet. And so one of her issues, she's driving everyone around. She's got daughters in play. She's got daughters who have to go to preschool. She's got daughters who are in gymnastics. She's got daughters who go to soccer. Like, she is everywhere. And then on top of that, she works at night as a nurse. She works like 3 days a week as a nurse at night. So when I look at her, I'm like, holy crap, I literally don't understand how it's feasible. I don't get it. Yeah. So give her some of your framework. One of her biggest battles, and I think she's kind of made peace with this at this point, and she'll hopefully make it up when my niece Peyton can start driving, and I think that'll help alleviate some of the stresses. But she gets like horrible sleep, absolutely no sleep every single day. And so give her some of your framework. What advice would you put in that situation? And you work with moms, so that's why I offered this example. You got a busy mom. How do they solve some of their life stresses?
Okay, I'm writing this down here for a second because I got a couple of thoughts here. First of all, if you move to South Dakota, you can drive at the age of 14.
There we go. All right. I'll tell her to move.
And we have an amazing state here. I have 4 kiddos, so this is very relatable. And then I run 3 brands. So it's very, very, very relatable. And I would also tell you, as a guy leading into this, is that, you know how love expands with each child? Time somehow expands as well. Like, there is enough time in the day, and there's a reason why there's a 24-hour period. So I'd say that. So she's a busy mom. What I would recommend for anybody that is feeling and hearing the story and going, yep, totally there, I look at pillars of my life, and I've been running these for 15 years, and they work fairly well. Now, I do have moments of like, whoop, we got to reevaluate. But for the most part, what she is doing is she has a me system. So that's how she's taking care of herself. She has a food system, answering the question, what's for supper? She has a family system, like, okay, what when you think of your sister and their family, what's important to them, you could probably name a few things like, they really like sports, or they really like church or plays, I think you mentioned. Then she has a work system, how she's showing up at church and showing up for these women, and being a nurse. She has some system around work. And then she also has a home system. That's like how she's taking care of her home and living and leaving a legacy. So if she looks at those 5 systems, you can challenge her to say, hey, which one of these is the most broke? She'd probably be able to name it, or she'd go like, I'm so sick of eating the same thing. Well, that's food system. Or she'd say,
can I ask a question real quick on that?
Yes.
Are we saying broke in the sense that like it doesn't function as properly as the others, or how are we framing that?
Very good question. It feels the most broken. It feels the most chaotic. It feels the most like,
chaotic.
I don't want to talk about that one. I just don't want to talk about that. And you already mentioned one. She's not sleeping well. So that's actually a me system problem. And I hesitate to say that because we do not need another script about me. So, however, she could maybe evaluate like, okay, how could talk to her family about it? Because one thing is just confessing to your family, which she's confessed to you as a brother, like, I'm not sleeping really well. Is like, okay, well, how can we make that happen? So similar to talking about the hustle, we have got to shift our perspective a little bit and figure out how to get you more sleep, so that you can like perform better for your family. And perform is a disgusting word. I shouldn't use that, but so that you can show up better for your family. And so what does that look like? Does that look like taking your nurse job, your work system down to just 2 nights a week? Does that look like getting an assistant for your ministry? Does that look like dialing the hours back just until you can improve your sleep? Does it actually look like not waking up so early, showing yourself grace? Maybe it's a period where you don't get up early to work out. That's a lot of guilt right there. It's like, we have to get up and work out. Do you right now? Because sleep is a very big priority for us. And so it's looking at like, okay, right now my me system, if you will, is not operating like I want it to. And it's starting to show up in all of my roles. So how can I, and I mean, there's dozens of resources, right? But how could you apply more attention to that so that you can carry on the rest of your roles? Because it doesn't mean forever. Like you said, you could just do it for 6 weeks. 6 weeks of really concentrating on how I can sleep better. Maybe it's not working out. Maybe it's narrowing my nurse's hours to just 2 nights a week. Maybe it's narrowing my church activities. Maybe it's not doing the next play. Like sometimes it will affect the other people, but it's not like forever. It's just for a period of time until you can rebuild. And this way we're talking about the me system, but it might be just a 6-week period to improve your food system or whatever. So it's like just not feeling chaotic over all of it. Cause like you said, you look at it and you're like, I have no idea. So instead of feeling overwhelmed by all of it, just pick one of those pillars, if you will, and work on that one.
So you keep mentioning the 6-week period. You mentioned that for my business as well as now my sister in these 2 examples, right? Everyone take this for your own, trying to apply it into whatever you're going through in your life. But what's the 6-week period? Like, what's that all about?
Magic that happens. And I like 6 weeks and then 30 days. So I think when you're trying something new, especially if it's like really new, the first 10 days is absolutely unbearable. Like we've all done this where we're like, we're going to wake up at 4 a.m. and it's unbearable. You're like, I'm not going to make it. And then the 10 days after that, it's uncomfortable where you're like, this still really stinks, but whatever. And then the 10 days after that, it's actually like acceleration. You're like, wait a minute. I think I could do this, right? So that's that first 30 days. And then the next 30 days is just making it a habit where you don't even think about it. So there is a period, and it's usually about 6 weeks long, where when I'm coaching people, I'm like, just hold out for the 6 weeks. Then after the 6 weeks, evaluate like, nope, I don't want to do that again. Or yeah, I think I actually do want to continue this. Because I think it's unrealistic to be like, this is my new habit for the rest of my life. Let's just have a 6-week check-in.
I like that. It gives you some time to actually see if it's affecting your life in a positive manner, if it's hurting you a little bit more. Like, yeah. And I'm picturing my sister too.
Because it would be rocking for you, but then your family's like, I miss seeing you.
Yeah. And that's where a lot of my sister's instance comes from. She wants she puts in the time for everybody else because that's what brings her joy. She likes hanging out with all of her daughters and her husband. Like that gives her joy, but at the same time, it's affecting her health. Not in a bad way. I mean, she still shows up for everything and she's amazing. And that's why I don't understand it. Like, and that's like mom power right there. My other sister does that too. Like I look at my mom when I was growing up and every mom has that capability. I think guys will never fully understand. So maybe that's why it's so curious to me.
Could be. The other thing I would tell her too is like, I love the analogy of when they say the oxygen mask on the airplane, you know, but I would like you to ask a mother if that ever occurred where you're not like, this is going to my kid. Like, are you actually going to put it on yourself? I know we're supposed to. So I don't like using that analogy because I've never been put in that scenario, thankfully. But I like using the analogy of a cell phone. If you start at like, if you forget to plug your cell phone in at night, we're all super aware of how much charge is on our cell phone. If it's at 39%, do you think you're going to last until like your phone's going to die at 11 a.m., right? So it's the same thing for a mother. If you do not get a full charge and whatever that looks like for each individual woman, you're gonna peter out at like noon. So figure out what it is that will give you a full charge, if that's a good night's rest, and how to pursue that. If it is in fact alone time, if it's in your Bible, if it's reading, if it's running, if it's walking with a girlfriend, figure out what that kind of full charge is so that you can operate at a better level than depletion.
I like that. Because a lot of times too, when you start going, when you're depleted, this is the easiest case to understand, but like if you're going to the gym and you're already exhausted, your muscles are already broken down, yes, you can still go get a workout and that it'll work, but a lot of times you need that proper rest in between working out the same muscle group, or else it's going to do absolutely nothing except possibly hurt you even more.
Well, and I have a good example of that for myself personally. So running all of this, I couldn't figure out why. I went to my chiropractor myself and the guy, I'm like, I'm sore all the time. I'm sore like I ran 20 miles each day sore. And so it kind of took a look at my levels and stuff and then figured out I was malnourished. And I was like, I'm still eating. I don't understand. Well, nothing was absorbing in because I was recycling the same toxins. So when I was like, my theory in my head was if I work out harder, I burn off more stress. And so I was like, I'm just going to work out harder and burn out. It doesn't work that way, you guys. So he was the only person in my entire life of running half marathons and working out and all this that said no working out for 2 weeks. And that was so painful to accept until after the 2 weeks, I realized, I'm not so sore anymore. So sometimes what you think is solving the problem, if you get too far into it, you'll be years into it before you're like, wait. Breaks are necessary.
They are necessary. There's a reason why they're the most important part of the car.
Yes. Good line.
So Rebekah, we've kind of gone through 2 examples now. I want to kind of shift the focus of today's conversation now. I want to ask you a couple of different questions about your 5 key systems that every entrepreneur needs to do to thrive. And for everyone listening out there, this podcast is not purely for if you're starting a business or if you have a successful business already ongoing, but these same 5 principles, Rebekah and I already discussed them a little bit beforehand, so I know they can apply into your careers, wherever that may be or may look like, and into your family life and into your relationships and everything that is possibly causing you stress right now. So take note for all of these 5, grab a pen and paper, and let's get going.
Okay. It's so true because I've been living them, but I designed them so that it doesn't apply to just startups or apply to, it's actually when things change in your life, you can gear them towards what's going on and emphasize the thing that's going on.
I love it. So let's hear some of them.
Okay, so the first one we talked about is your me system. That's like asking yourself, how do I get a full charge? And everybody's going to be different. And I loved coaching over the years. Some people, it's like, I want to date with a girlfriend. Go have a blast. I want to go for a run. I like mine to be alone, but permission, if you have little ones, your me system may not necessarily be alone. That's just a stage of life, but it would be me focused. So during it, you're saying, yeah, mommy's taking care of herself because of XYZ. So write down a few things about what would you want for a full charge. That's answering that question. The second one, which takes up a lot of time, is the food system. And we underestimate how much of our lives revolve around the question, what's for supper? And I don't know if that's relatable to you, Brandon, yet, but seriously, you ask yourself at 7 a.m., then you ask yourself at noon, then you ask yourself at 2, 4, and then at 5:30, you're making a phone call to some other place to make the food, right? So just by answering that question, my rule is like answer the question before 9 a.m. And you don't have to do anything. All you have to do is answer the question. Like, tonight we're getting takeout. Okay. Then the mental bandwidth of not asking yourself that question throughout the day is huge. Or if you're going to make food, get out a few of the ingredients. Or if you want to do everything in advance, you can. But see how it's flexible for like each individual is like, no, I love making food. I'm going to start making food at 4:30. More power to you. But make the decision about what that food is earlier so you're not also stopping at the grocery store, also looking up the recipe. Do everything you can in advance so that later it is more joyful and less like asking yourself all day. So that's the food system. And there's tons of permissions in there. And then we could talk about your work system. And that's answering the questions who, what, when, where, and why. And we often don't answer those questions. We just get started, right? In the hustle culture, we're like, okay, here's how we're going to do it. And here's where we're going to do it. Meanwhile, you're like 2 years in and you're still at your dining room table, which is fine. But is that working? Or does it like kind of get a little coggy because the family comes home and they're like, Mom, Dad, can you put your stuff away? Or is it always on your brain because it's at your dining room table? Like ask yourself, where should the work be happening? And then one of them that's really painful is asking yourself when. When does work happen? Because it can't be all the time, you guys. You'll run on burnout really quick. So ask yourself, when am I going to work? And guess what? You get to choose. In most cases, the ones listening here, you do get to choose. So when are you going to work and when aren't you going to work? And set up those so that everybody knows it. Because if you ever want to be held accountable to hours, ask your kids. They'll be like, Mom, stop sitting at the sewing machine. You said it's time to be with family. And so they'll hold you accountable. And then there's your home system. So that's like, how are you going to do your laundry? How are you going to clean the house? How's it going to be a sanctuary? Like, what is the 4 feet around your entryway? This is such an easy hack, is like, just make the 4 feet that you come into the house as cute and as welcoming and as clean as possible. And it'll make a huge difference on if the rest of the house is chaotic. Just do that much, just the 4 feet around your door. So that's your home system. And then your family system. And this is because we don't spend enough time. We do spend time thinking about, hi, Casey. Hello. Sorry, mailman, he's coming to get the packages. We don't spend enough time thinking about the legacy that we're currently living, but we love to think about the legacy that we want to leave behind. And sometimes the two of them don't line up. So like, what is the legacy that you're like, this is what's going to be put in my obituary. This is what I want to leave behind. Are you actually currently living that? And that you have to sit with for a little bit. And so if you decide that you're going to be a family that has a cabin, if you're going to be a family that does rodeo, if you're going to be a family that loves sports, if you're going to be a family that really volunteers for church, that goes on mission trips, be clear about what family you want to have right now so that it lines up with the legacy you also want to leave behind.
Let me pick and prod on you on that one for a second. If you're choosing that legacy you want your family to be, the church-going family that goes on mission trips, the one that goes camping all the time, the one that goes to the sporting events, the one that really likes going to the musicals, does that limit your growth, especially as like, once again, I don't have any kids yet. So maybe I'm speaking completely out of place. And my wife and I were just kind of spontaneous. We go and do random things, but that's where we're at in our stage of life. But I picture sometimes, or I feel like if you just say, we are the camping family, we are this family, we are that family, does that not limit the growth of your kids into becoming their own unique individuals? And does that not limit you and your husband yourselves thinking like, okay, we're doing the same things over and over again. Life is getting pretty boring. Like, don't you need some spice in there a little bit?
Absolutely. So then you can start deciding, like, you know what? Everybody's crabby and we're always fighting during camping. We got to change gears. This isn't fun for us. And it might be a natural life change that's happening as well, where your oldest doesn't want to go because he wants to spend time with friends. And so it's like, all right, well, what could we change in our family? So that's the thing about the systems, is they do evolve as your stages and your roles change. So sometimes, like in a family system, you may start taking care of a loved one. And caretaking becomes a part of your family system. And then you explain it to your kids like, hey, I know that we used to do this, but in this stage right now, we're actually going to prioritize this. And so like a good example of that is that we used to go up to my folks' place a lot. And that was kind of like our vacation spot because it's only an hour from here. And they just live in on an acreage. We farm and ranch, so we're used to animals and that thing. But we used to do that all the time until travel ball started. And then now we like crave going up there. We just don't get to do it as frequently. So it's still a part of our family system, but it's not at the frequency we got to have. The other thing is like, you said, how do you know if you're going to box your kid in? You will start that if family system, which is important, spending time with their children, you'll start to realize what they're geared for. So I have one kiddo who loves animals. I mean, that's all she can think about. So when we started, I have a seamstress that works for me that has meat goats, and we have some land just across the road from us that my husband was like, well, maybe we get some meat goats and this could be part of Rosalind's project. So that's evolving with it too. It'll be part of our family system, but it evolved us actually knowing a little bit more about her. And then for us praying about it, like, hey, what are some things that we can do to keep encouraging that love for her?
That's awesome. Now, Rebekah, as we're kind of coming up here to the close of today's episode of the Get Over Yourself podcast, before we go, I want to ask you a couple questions about your business. You've obviously made that kind of your pride and joy for a lot of years now. Tell us a little bit about your handmade purses, where that started, where the idea came from, and where you guys are at today.
Okay, so that actually lines up perfectly with what we've been talking about. I have a really quick story. My son was 18 months old, my oldest, and my business was 18 months old. And I was running in and out of our farmhouse to grab stuff to pack for a craft show, an art show. And he was tugging on my shirt to say, I need a snack, I need a snack. And by the third time he asked, I just exploded. And I was like, stop. And to this day, I can still see his little blue eyes welling up. And that was the moment that I was like, I don't know how to do this. I can't do both work and home life at this pace that I'm trying to do. And so I actually canceled the show that day. I got him a snack and I sat with him, and I sat with God and was like, okay, how am I going to make this happen? Because I did not get the message quit, which some of us do, but that was not the message I received. It was like, how can I do both? So I set to timing everything, to figuring out how long things took to do, including the sewing, answering the emails, feeding him, snack time, bedtimes, working out, all these things. And that's where the system started coming out. And so, yes, I love sewing the purses, and I'm still doing it. It's been 15 plus years, you guys. I get to stay home. I have it pretty dialed in. I've got 20 people on my team, and we just, we allow women to custom make their own bags, because I believe that in the beginning, God created his first Bible verse. So creating is super important, you guys. And so I think that when women create, they get a little bit of joy, as you can hear in my voice. And so when you go to the website, designyourownpurse.com, they get to have that experience. But that, seriously, the only reason I'm in business now is because I stopped that moment and said, how can I do both? And started forming some systems to be able to do both. Because the hustle at that point was not sustainable with as many children and as much as I wanted to do in life. So I figured out how to do it.
Well, that really is the perfect close to today's episode, because I feel like at the very beginning, we talked about the systems we need inside of our lives, our work lives, in order to create that kind of harmony, create that somewhat of a balance when life is going crazy. And then you wrap it up, obviously, with the exact same message. Final question I have for you today. If the entire world could hear you at this very moment, they can understand you, they could hear you, what piece of advice would you tell them, and why would that be?
I would say just 1% it. So as overwhelming and as beautiful as an idea is, whether it's born of yourself or born of God, you are equipped to do it. And so just do it at 1%. If it feels overwhelming, so that's like one email, one Google call, or one Google search. It's just 1%ing everything. Everything I've ever accomplished, I started with 1%. Chances are all of us have, and that'll snowball into more, but do everything at 1% to start with. Less overwhelming.
That's awesome. Well, thank you, Rebekah. And guys, if you are curious to hear more from Rebekah, I'm actually going to be hopping onto her podcast. So if you're listening on the Get Over Yourself podcast and you want to hear more, Rebekah, where can they find us when I'm going to be hopping on your show? Where can they find you to continue listening as well?
Oh, yes. If you want to listen to any of the podcast episodes, there's over 250 simple hacks. Encourageyourpodcast.com. I also have my academy over there and also my membership course. And then if you want to design a cute purse, go to designyourownpurse.com.
That's perfect. I'm going to have to share that one with my wife. I don't know that I'm perfectly ready to design my perfect, beautiful purse, but my wife may be. So there we go.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Rebekah. Guys, once again, I'm going to be hopping onto Rebekah's show here in just a couple of minutes. So make sure to go check out the Encourager podcast. And for all my long-term listeners out there, I would appreciate a 5-star review. That's how I can continue to grow the show. Likewise, if you know anybody who would benefit from hearing today's episode of the Get Over Yourself podcast, make sure to send it on over to them. You guys are my best form of marketing. I'm definitely going to be sending this episode on over to my sister, Nicole. So thanks, Rebekah.
Awesome.
And guys,
Thank you,
we will
Brandon.
see you next time.